And let me just say, when it comes to customer success, I see these two words as not interchangeable, but inseparable. And what I mean by that is in many other business functions, you can be a manager and be very capable administering the team's ability to kind of deliver what it needs to do. But customer success, because of its such a strategic nature in business these days, and maybe eventually it'll become like the other business functions. But for now, customer success, as you all know, is really prominent. It's really growing really rapidly, and it's seen as kind of the instrument to really advocate for customers internally, so that there's so much need for it to be in the spotlight. And so I think I can't emphasize this enough. It's so important for managers and all levels of management within customer success to be true leaders. And so I'm going to talk about that quite a bit here. So quickly, I'm in PDF form here, but that's fine. We'll work with this. My bio, you guys will get this presentation, I guess, right, Maria and Dirk? That you can see for yourselves, and there's links to all this stuff. But in a nutshell, I'm based in Toronto, and I'm currently at Oracle. I shared a kind of breaking news with the breakout crew that I resigned from Oracle. Maria, big shock to you, I'm sure. Last Friday, after 5.5 years, I'm joining a company called ESG, which they trademarked motto, customer success as a service. And so feel free to check that out. I'm happy to connect with all of you on LinkedIn and can have conversations if you want to understand more about that. But I'm pretty excited about that. I'll be the VP of customer success, helping to grow their business. They've got new investors, and they've got big plans to kind of go after primarily digital customer success for companies that really need it. On top of all that, I do a lot of kind of pro bono work with smaller companies, a couple of startups, 3 or 4 of them, helping them out. I sit on a couple of boards. Recently joined the George Washington School of Business as on their advisory council for customer experience, and it's not on here, but I was just asked last week to guest speak at the University of San Francisco's business school. They teach customer success there as part of the MBA program, and they want me to guest lecture a couple of times this year, and so I'm excited about that too. Moving forward, so let me just say, I think any topic, any session around leadership and management and customer success, you should ground yourself in, and you guys are all aware of this, but I think it's important to just remember, as you're managing your people in your teams, always understand what's the mission of customer success. It's too easy to get distracted by other entities in your company. Sometimes that might pull you away from what the core mission of customer success should be. And really, unless your senior executives disagree, I think fundamentally, this is what you see on the screen would be kind of true of most customer success organizations. You're more or less doing this. Not everyone's doing implementation. I know that. We do at Oracle. And even if you're not, I think in customer success, if you're in a B2B environment and someone's implementing the product, it's so critical that you understand that piece, even if you don't have involvement there, because it influences everything else, of course. But if you're in a B2C situation, then it's the customer who's implementing it themselves, the consumer, by installing it, and that's fine. But moving through the life cycle, obviously adoption and value phase, in my opinion, is the most important of all, because if you get that right, then the other things will follow. Renewal will follow, like authentic renewal, meaning that the customer wants to renew, and ultimately growth will happen if it's right for them, because they've adopted already the solution and they see great value in expanding the relationship. And so as you go through your management journey with your teams, I think it's always important to kind of use this as a touchstone to understand the mission of customer success are these things. Now, when I think about customer success leadership challenges and opportunities, I like to think of it this way. I always put the customer at the center of everything. And that might sound like motherhood and apple pie, as they say, and everyone should just buy into that, but not everyone does, especially in large corporations. There's a lot of people who still have a real kind of product-centered mindset, and they see themselves working for companies, and the goal is actually just getting the product out there and pushing the product all the time. And the customer should find the product. The market should find the product. And there's obviously debates around that, but the way I see this is without a focus of the customer on the customer, your sustainability over time as a business will be at risk. And so this isn't exhaustive, but the way I see it is, if you're a customer success leader, you're going to have to always be mindful of how your team plays in the larger picture of the company culture. It needs to complement it and needs to kind of align with it. It can't stand out too much, but at the same time, going back to what I said earlier, customer success needs to be seen as kind of this transformational kind of entity because it's representing the customer. It needs to always be pushing the culture too. And I think that's generally true, whether it's a large legacy vendor like Oracle or SAP. It's also true of smaller companies. I believe that because of its proximity to the customer success should be that kind of challenge for the company to keep pushing forward with the customer at the center of that. And so if you're a leader and a manager, you should be keeping that in the back of your mind too. Okay. And so, and then moving around the circle, product management, I see more and more it being the link to that is being so critical for customer success and the leader's ability to kind of facilitate that, that kind of conduit of information flow, really, in my opinion, should separate, average leaders from great leaders, because ultimately, I think we want the product to be very dynamically evolving based on the customer's kind of environment and needs. And who better to represent that than customer success and the data that it collects. And then going around support, everyone has support, of course, and a lot of people have, by and large, varying opinions about the support teams that they work with. I would say it's fine and well to have your concerns and complaints and applause and all that kind of stuff, but I think we should all step up in customer success and be very proactive in providing support with more information that they need to improve themselves. So they might be adopting, AI for some of their means to deliver the service, but nothing can replace the ability to tap into customer contextual data. What's the business situations that they're facing? What are they trying to do? And if there's a way you can kind of figure that out programmatically to push that into support, it'll improve the way they respond or react to customers when they reach out to them. Customer success metrics, veracity, that simply means, in my opinion, if it's all well and good to collect a lot of information that you feel is accurately depicting how you're delivering your service, but the management team should be really critically looking at that and saying, is it truthful? Is it actually representing the truth of the situation? Or are we kind of like fudging it a little bit? And it's important to have veracity around that, because if the data should be used as an instrument by the management team to evangelize internally, to continue to build advocates inside the company to rally around the customer success mission going forward. And I see it's the CS metrics as an imperative to get that right, but it's a lot of work. moving around communications, the stronger customer success becomes within a company, the more important it is to get even better at communicating. And so you're obviously, if you're in a management position, you try to be really good at communicating with your team, being really professional, being really clear, being that conduit between executives' kind of statements around strategy and how it actually should work with the team's tasks. So that's one way we can describe communication. But on top of all that, I think managers need to really get great at becoming champions of customer success and be able to kind of help educate the rest of the company around the importance of doing what's right for the customer, delivering the outcomes that they expect, and continuing bringing allies on board. Because again, the more you work at this customer success, the more you need these other entities within the company, the other business functions like sales, like support, like services, and marketing to be part of that picture. And moving again, so CX initiatives, there is a clear distinction between customer success and customer experience, but they're complementary. So we cannot have a full picture of what the customer's experience is if you're not looking at the customer success kind of business and how it's impacting the customer's ability to kind of achieve their business goals. Because obviously, if they don't achieve their business goals, that's going to affect their experience overall. So we're not just talking about a customer's look and feel with the product and how they perceive that. It's actually, are they getting the value from it? So the two are really dovetailed in my mind. And so again, back to being a manager, all this stuff you need to keep in your head and figure out how are you going to kind of lead your team towards being good at all this stuff. I mentioned a little bit earlier about the working with other business functions. That's what the cross-org alignment is all about. Understanding what, you will understand what is required of these different teams to fulfill what customer success needs to do to produce the right outcomes for the customer. But the job of a manager or a leader, especially like a senior leader, is to be that networker. To make sure to kind of clear any kind of misconceptions and soften any kind of friction, and which is especially kind of true in large companies where there might be some entrenched kind of beliefs or competition. And I think it's important for senior customer success leaders to be really highly skilled at negotiating, at being diplomatic, at having really great communication skills around educating and persuading people around being part of the mission and not see customer success as this conflicting or competitive kind of threat, which sometimes it can be perceived as. And then finally, at the end of the day, it's all about revenue. We can say what we want to create advocates, and that's true. We want to make sure that customers achieve their outcomes. But the truth of it is we want our company to be successful. And the way our world measures business success is through revenue. So we do have to make sure that what we're doing and the teams that we're leading understand this, that the work we're doing is ultimately really to get the customer to renew. But that's not necessarily good enough because the way, again, our markets reward companies is by they will invest in companies who are growing. And so we ultimately do want our customers to grow because that will help our companies themselves grow. So I'm bringing it down a bit. So that when I think about management, specifically in my mind, you as a manager need to be good at these things. You need to be a good coach. Right? You have to be able to figure out how the individuals on your teams, what skills they have, what work they're doing, and what can you do to help them be better at those things? What information do you have? What experience do you have? What is your special kind of power around empathy, communication that you can bring to bear to really be a great coach? Because that's really what a manager needs to be, is coach people on moving in the right direction and accomplishing the job that they're hired to do. Moving along, you have to be able to kind of justify the investment of the company in your team. Not to say that you're going to be asked about that all the time, but you need to be able to kind of have that answer in your own head of, I can validate why my team is so important, because I can connect the dots between the work it is doing at a certain level in driving value for customers. And if those customers are happy, then they will renew. So if you can kind of explain that in your head, then you should be able to turn around and be able to kind of coach your people better to stay engaged, highly engaged. People get motivated when they understand what the larger goals are. And so the value delivery piece is critical, I believe, for a manager to get really skilled at. And kind of aligned with that is the how do you prove it, is the operations and communications piece. So understanding how you actually measure how your team is doing in fulfilling its role of delivering the kind of service to the customers, and how do you measure that they're doing it well. So the measurement's one thing, the communications is the second part of that for me is inseparable. You have to be able to kind of share that information, whether it's good or bad or mediocre. You have to be able to kind of stand up and say what that means, because any kind of information should be kind of something that could trigger some conversation. So if you're communicating that the team is struggling, that shouldn't just be something you want to shy away from. That should be an opportunity to create improvement or strategy that you want to bring in some senior leaders around to say, okay, how can we improve this? That it might not be the fault of the people, it could be the fault of the service. So moving along, territory management, I think that a manager really needs to understand the broad portfolio of accounts. And that's not to say that you know every single thing about them. Your people should know every single thing about their accounts, but you need to understand at the aggregate level, what's the territory, what are we covering here, and what kind of stories can I tell? So more and more these days in business, at least in customer success, they talk a lot about industry kind of sectors that customer success needs to get really good at. And at large companies like Oracle, or we're thinking about that with customer success, having teams more specifically focused on healthcare or manufacturing. And so if I'm leading a team that focuses on that, I need to myself be really good at what is that market? What are the generalized needs of companies within that market? What are they usually seeing, trying to achieve? And then be able to kind of turn around and be able to stand up and tell a story around that. What I mean by a story is those things. What are they trying to achieve? How are we trying to fulfill those needs? And how good are we at doing that? So a lot of that storytelling I'm talking about is all internal. It's not you're going to be standing on a stage. You might at a meetup like this talking about that kind of stuff, but by and large, I think the biggest need is for managers to be really good at internally telling stories around their team's abilities. And finally, probably the most important thing is the talent management. People are on teams and join companies because they have obvious needs around income and self-fulfillment, but people want to grow themselves too. And so I don't think in this industry of ours that people just expect to stay static. I think most people want to rise, and whether that's management or not, they still want to rise and they want to get better at what they do and build up this kind of portfolio of a resume that really shows them and demonstrates to others that they're becoming more expert at this business function. So it behooves the managers to really help develop the people, because the more you develop them, the more you will benefit as a manager, but also as the team and the company benefits when people improve. And so you should never be afraid of people wanting to be educated. You should encourage it. And finally, you should do that for yourself. I think too, you should try to make time to develop yourself, improve your own skills. And so I think that's a really critical piece of management. And again, back to what I was saying about customer success, because of its at this this point in evolution of business, customer success is playing such a prominent role that the development piece is so critical. So the next few slides, before I conclude this, I'm just going to kind of walk you through. This is Oracle's kind of framework for performance management. I mean, I've cleansed the slides of any sort of Oracle nomenclature, but I think this is, you may already have some sort of a framework, but if you're not, then this is I think it's pretty decent. I've been in a number of companies where there's been frameworks for performance management, and I think it's very helpful for managers to have something to operate off of. So the way I'm just going to quickly talk about this is, let's look at these roles. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 levels of individual contributors, and there's a manager role here. Now, the way there's core competencies that the cursor is kind of circling right now that are used to measure people against and their ability to do these things. But the numbers here are the expectations of levels at each of these job roles. Okay, so for example, IC2, which is a lower level, not entry level, but it's a lower level role for a customer success manager. There's an expectation that they'd be able to meet a 2, and on the subsequent slide, I'll tell you what that means. And if you move along, for example, a collaboration skill, a core competency for an IC5, which is the top level for a CSM before they decide if they want to become a manager or not, they have to meet a level of 4 for that, which means a very sophisticated level of being able to collaborate. Now, these are just examples of these. Okay, so I'm going to choose communicating for impact, which is one of these core competencies, and it just fleshes it out for you. So when you get this deck, you kind of look at that and say, okay, I understand it. If I'm a manager, I use this kind of as my Bible for measuring my people. And you don't just do this once a year, although some people do, but really it should be used kind of ongoing, and use this as a basis for understanding your teams, the members of your team, and their ability to kind of meet the expectations. So I've mentioned that, for an IC5, which is the top level CSM, I think it was like, there was listed as a 4 for this one, communicating for impact. Yeah, a 4. I go down to a 4 here. The expectation is for that top level CSM, they have advanced skills in that regard. Anything less than advanced, you probably want to have a way to help them grow into that. So what that means is, for communicating for impact, they influence and they build stakeholder relationships external to customer success, which means that they're working with senior people within support or sales or marketing or service, any other group that's required to help customer success deliver the service model. And we should all know that customer success really can't do the job on its own. I think in most companies, it requires work from others to really help customers truly achieve success. So that's really what this is all about. Okay, so there's 3 examples if you want to look at these things later, and just kind of understand the correlation between these things. So my final slide, we've got like 4 minutes left, it's kind of good timing here. I find it helps me when I'm helping managers understand their role, just to kind of, again, be grounded in some simple things. And so I like to think of it as, ask yourself some questions. Am I good at answering these questions? So one question is, who are the customers? It seems rather obvious, right? But if you're leading a team, really need to understand who the customers are, generally speaking, what's the persona of these customers? What are they trying to achieve? They're buying something. Why do they buy these? Why do they buy our product? Why didn't they go to somewhere else? Well, what's so special about our product, and why are they staying with us, or why did they leave? So stuff like that, right? And then what's the service that you're providing? You, as a manager and a leader of customer success, really need to understand the service, because that's where the coaching opportunities really more readily arise, is around the service. People might be struggling with some aspect of the service, maybe your CSM, some of the CSMs are really fantastic or expert at various aspects of the service, but not everyone is. And it's helpful if the manager really has a good comprehensive appreciation and knowledge and conversational level knowledge about the service. And that's why, it's not critical, but it's helpful when managers have some themselves experience in customer success, delivering the service themselves. How do you communicate your team's successes and challenges? Again, going back to customer success being in a prominent place right now in the business world, this is why it's so critical to be able to be skilled at communicating the KPIs of your teams, so that you're able to kind of continually persuade senior executives to continue the investment. Because if you're not selling the service, they're funding it in some way. And the trick is, you can go with renewal rates and all that stuff, but this executives still have questions around whether the service is absolutely continually critical. And it's really helpful if the leaders are really good at communicating, so that they can help convince people to continue, executives to continue the investment going forward. How do I evolve my team? So what's their skills? Who are the members? What are their aspirations? Try to kind of figure out how those things can kind of weave together to achieve the team's overall goal. You obviously should have some sort of goals for the team in the next year. And how are you going to achieve those things? You achieve them through your people, and you need to understand how those individuals on their own do their job, but together can do a greater job, collaborating together. And how do you facilitate your team's education? This I mentioned here, education can never end. It can't, because customers are continually changing. You as a customer of yourself in your private life, your needs and your preferences are always changing. And so companies have to respond to that. And it helps when you're open to understanding that and encouraging the team to continually be educated. And some of that will be formal education provided by you or your company, but a lot of it really hinges on the individuals and their desire to self-improve. And that's why you should encourage them to educate outside of your company too. So for a variety of means, it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be a fee at all. You can educate yourself through just general reading or attending these sorts of events and webinars and that sort of stuff. And finally, rewards programs. And, it's really, these programs are critical for keeping your people. It's become a cliche these days around the Great Resignation, but it's true. People are leaving. I mean, I just resigned myself. So it's important to have a means to recognize top performers. You're not going to be 100% perfect around keeping everyone, but if you can keep people engaged and make sure, I would just say, this is just my private recommendation, make sure the awards mean something. The rewards, don't just give them away because people show up. I think there needs to be kind of a real distinct kind of understanding that the rewards that are given really are for exceptional kind of examples of behavior that you really want that to be the model for people going forward. There's nothing worse than giving awards to everybody, because people are just like, well, they see through that, right? So I just think I'll just close with that. So this slide is really meant as kind of like you can go away and kind of ask yourselves your own questions or use these, and I think I'll just stop there.
Thank you, Peter. These questions are really something. It's like a very way to reflect. So excellent slide. Any thoughts or questions from the group?
Yeah, this was great, Peter. Thank you so much. A question for me, I mean, this is all really great advice for when you're in management or in a managerial position, but what about those of us that are still on the individual contributor level? Do you have any tips or advice for actually moving up to leadership or to management?
Sure. So I would say, yeah, I designed this presentation knowing that some people in the audience wouldn't be in management, and I'm not going to be flippant, but I could, maybe that you could take this and say, "Oh, that convinces me not to be in management," because there's a lot to think about when you're in management, and I've known Maria for 3 years, and we've talked a lot, and she's always wanted to be in management, but she was going in with eyes wide open, right? So she understood there's a lot of things to think about differently. And so to your question, I would say, really, you understand yourself, right? So make sure, first of all, that your motivation isn't just financial, because with a lot of companies, it's not always necessarily a big bump anyways. They may move you into management, and it's really about your maybe eventually getting a lot more money, but it's really about, they want you to be in a position where you have more responsibilities, and you have to accept or understand that much about yourself. Okay, I'm really ready to be a leader. So even at a low level, first level manager, I always say to people, think of it as a leadership position. Try to take the opportunity to figure out what are my skills. Going back to when I became a manager, I believed at the time I had really good communication skills. I had a really good ability, and I didn't understand it, I think, how to articulate it until a vice president told me that I had it. That this ability to connect corporate strategy with the actual day-to-day tasks of people. In my case, I was one of those people, and I understood that, okay, this task I'm working on makes a difference, and it's actually putting into play what they talk about at the senior level. And so that ability to kind of like, to understand that conduit, if you recognize that about yourself, you might have the attributes to be a pretty good leader, because that's a way to get in front of others and help them understand that. That's probably the most important part, is making that connection between the executives team's aspirations, their stated goals, and the ability to kind of actually put that into play. So I guess to answer your question, I would say just be honest with yourself, understand what your strengths are, try to kind of amplify that in a way that can, and if you believe that would be a good management trait, then start behaving that way too. So if you're a senior CSM, but you really would like to be a manager or director, start actually doing some of that stuff, meaning vocalizing to your peers, sharing information with your peers, kind of showing that you actually are leading without being their boss. I'm not saying that you need to kind of weigh in on their performance or anything like that. It's more around sharing information, demonstrating that you're being proactive around leading with information. I think that's probably the easiest way for a CSM to demonstrate that they have some of the qualities that would make a great leader. I hope that answered the question. It's kind of complicated.
Yeah. I know it was a big question. You could probably have like multiple presentations on it, but that was great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anyone else? I mean, this is such a massive topic, leadership. In fact, I was in the middle of designing a whole leadership program for Oracle's customer success. I mean, people are taking it over, but it's not a simple, 1 hour thing. It's large.
I might have another question.
Sure.
Yeah, you mentioned, and this is something that I sort of had a bit of an issue with myself. Point 3, how do you communicate your team's successes and challenges? So basically, how do you sort of validate to an executive level, the worth, I guess, and value of your team? So there are traditional KPIs. My particular business model, we don't have, they're mostly government contracts, so we don't have that much churn. So NRR isn't that much of an issue. So, I mean, are there any, I guess, things that should stand out from a CS practice?
Yeah, well, I would say kind of the most common one would be some sort of like customer sentiment whether it's NPS or some sort of way to communicate to people the opinion or the perceptions that the customers have of a number of things, the service, the individual, the brand of the company. Those are all kind of good kind of data points to communicate up. It doesn't tell the full picture, of course, because it all depends on obviously who you're asking. And but I would say that's probably the most basic thing of a way to kind of get that conversation going. So when I say how do you communicate your team's successes and challenges, don't have an expectation that that's the end of, like, it should create a dialogue actually, because you want to communicate it up to start a conversation about from leaders like, okay, is that the right thing? Can you help us understand, are there more expectations that you have or less? Are we doing great? It shouldn't just be that this is the information and that's it. So the sentiment, the customer sentiment should be seen that way too. We're communicating up, the NPS is this. If I was an executive, I'd be saying, okay, that's sounds good. Is the trajectory good? You know, tell me more. Let's peel it back a bit more. And what are some of the details and what can we do to kind of influence that? You know, and obviously, you know, the renewals are critical. But again, I think growth for me is a really fascinating thing to look at because it tells a better story for me, that how the business is doing, because that means that the customers are making more of an effort to make a decision to trust you as a partner, a business partner, that you're going to be there with something that they anticipate that they're going to need. And that's a bigger decision than renewal. Sometimes we know, I mean, I've been in situations where customers will renew reluctantly because they don't feel they're ready to kind of explore options, and you don't want to have customers who are reluctant, although they exist. So there's just a lot of stuff that I would say you can look at besides kind of the NRR. I think NRR is, yeah, great, important, but if in your case, like for government, there, you know, I think we could have a conversation. There's probably a few things that you could kind of look at. I mean, I have worked with accounts that were government, and yeah, they're different. It's totally different than a lot of, you know, commercial companies, I would say.
Thanks.
You're welcome, Jeremy. Anybody else?
Any other questions, comments?
I have a question, Peter. I'm curious a bit to hear your thoughts around the importance that vision plays for a CS organization, and you know where you see that vision coming from, and the importance of it.
Yeah, so the way I see vision is tied to what I was saying earlier around the customer success kind of business function being in a prominent place right now in the business world, and I think the vision, it's critical that senior customer success leaders have a crisp vision. It shouldn't be, in my mind, something that's kind of like dull. It needs to be something where you're actually pushing the company. So if you understand your company's kind of what its aspirations are in the market, the customer success leader should really kind of make sure that the vision for its business function, customer success, not just complements that. It's not just meant to be a kind of a delivery vehicle. It actually should be something that's going to commit to helping the company improve its ability to kind of grow its market. So what I mean by that is, because again, what I said earlier, the proximity of the customers, the proximity of the customer data, customer success is very privileged to be able to kind of harvest that experience and the information. And the trick is turning it around and making something bigger out of it. And what the bigger usually should mean is that you're helping other organizations within the company improve their ability to do their work. So the information you collect around the customer during your time working with the customer should fuel the customer success, customer experience kind of individuals or teams to figure out a better, like stronger strategies based on that kind of really specific information you've collected. You could provide information to marketing that would help them become better marketers to those kinds of customers because of the experience those customers that you're working with are having. So the vision, I believe, is very important to get really good at because it really can serve to help customer success be seen as a really vital instrument for the company, but an instrument that's continually kind of pushing the company forward. And again, back to this core because of its proximity to the customer data. Think of it, there's no other organization in the company that has this proximity at a service level, at a program level. Support doesn't. Support has access to a kind of a very slice of information about the customer. They don't have the business context. Sales doesn't. Marketing doesn't. It's customer success that has all that information, or at least the opportunity to collect that information.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Peter.
I was wondering if I was rambling there a bit, but
No, it's great.
Oh, great. Well, thank you everyone for those questions. And again,
yes.
Thank you, Peter, for such a great presentation and just massive nuggets of wisdom. And I took so much notes, and thank you again for being such a great supporter of the CS Montreal community.
I love this meetup, everybody.
Yes. We do always encourage everyone to follow us on LinkedIn, of course, on the page. That's where we're going to be sharing upcoming meetups. And as well, we do have a Slack channel that it's getting a lot of more traction now. And you can join it as well.